She pushed the cleaning cart down the 41st floor hallway of Pearson Gaines Tower in Atlanta at 11:47 on a Wednesday night. 67 years old. Navy blue uniform, name badge on her chest that read Ruth. No last name. She stopped in front of a glass door. The CEO's office, walnut desk, family photos lined up on the shelf behind it. She looked through the glass at one of those photos. She was an Italiano. She did not open the door. She had stood in front of this door every night for 3 years. Not once did she turn the handle, not because she did not have the right, because she was afraid that if she opened it, her son would tell her to go home, and she was not ready to leave. Derek Tarvin Gaines was 42 years old, CEO and co-founder of Pearson Gaines Capital, a real estate investment firm headquartered on the 41st floor of the building that carried his name. Net worth $1.2 billion. Forbes 400. His signature was on contracts that moved entire city blocks from one owner to another. His days began at 7 in the morning, and they did not pause. A strategy meeting at 7:15 and a portfolio review at 8:30 and a conference call with investors in London at 9 o'clock and a lunch meeting downtown at noon and a second call with a development partner in Dallas, at 2 and a site visit in Midtown, at 4 o'clock and a dinner with the board, at 7 and emails in the back seat of his car, on the way home at 9. Every day built the same way, every hour accounted for, every minute assigned to something that produced a return. He earned $4.8 million a year, before bonuses. He lived in a penthouse in Buckhead that cost $3.2 million, and had a view of the city skyline that he saw for approximately 11 minutes each morning while drinking coffee and reviewing his calendar. He drove a Porsche Taycan. He had chosen the color in under 30 seconds during a phone call between 2 other phone calls. He was not a bad man. That is worth saying clearly because what follows might make it easy to think otherwise. He donated to 3 foundations. He funded a scholarship program at Aonsa, spent 45 minutes on the phone with a young entrepreneur he had never met, because someone on his team said the kid reminded them of Derek at 23. He could be generous. He could be kind. He simply could not be still. That particular Tuesday evening, he left the office at 9:14. He walked through the lobby, nodded once at the security guard behind the front desk, a man named Gerald, who had been working the evening shift for 6 years, and whose name Derek had learned only because Gerald wore it on a lanyard around his neck. As Derek pushed through the revolving door, the night cleaning crew was coming in through the service entrance on the east side of the building. 14 people. They would start at 10 o'clock and finish at 6 o'clock in the morning. 8 hours, 41 floors, bathrooms, and conference rooms, and executive offices, and kitchens and hallways that stretched the length of a city block. They were paid $11.50 an hour, which was the average for a commercial janitor in Atlanta. Most of them were black. Some were Hispanic. A few were immigrants whose English was still new and careful. Not one person in the building who worked during the day knew any of their names. They came in after the lights dimmed, and they left before the lights came back on. They existed in the space between one workday and the next. The way air exists in a room. Necessary, invisible. Derek did not see them come in. Not because he looked away, because they entered from a door he had never used at an hour. He had never been present for doing work. He had never once thought to ask about. The building was always clean when he arrived. That was all he knew. That was all he had ever needed to know. He got in his car, checked his phone. 2 missed calls, one from his co-founder Marlon Pierce about the quarterly board presentation, one from a number he did not recognize. He called Marlon back. The number he did not recognize was his mother's landline. She still had one. She had called at 6:47 that evening, which was the time she always called, because it was the time she had always called, even when he was in college, even when he was in business school, even when he was 26, and sleeping on a futon in a rented office, trying to build something out of nothing. 6:47 every time he did not call back. Derek Gaines had not spoken to his mother in 7 months. Not because he was angry, not because there had been a fight, or a falling out, or a door slammed hard enough to crack the frame. Nothing like that. He had simply gotten busy and then busier, and then the kind of busy where you stop noticing the things that are missing because the things that are present take up every square inch of available space. He had a reminder on his phone. Every Sunday, call mime. He had dismissed it 31 consecutive times. Each time he told himself next week. 31 next weeks is 7 months. That is how long it takes for silence to become a habit, and for a habit to become something a person stops noticing entirely. He did not hate his mother. He did not resent her. He loved her the way a person loves something they have placed very carefully on a high shelf out of sight in a room they no longer enter. Gently, distantly, and without realizing that the shelf is getting dusty. Ruth Arlene Gaines lived alone in a small house in Decatur, Georgia, 20 minutes east of Atlanta by car. It was the house Derek had grown up in, a 3-bedroom on a quiet street lined with oak trees that had been there longer than anyone on the block. She had paid off the mortgage 9 years ago. The front steps had been painted twice since Derek left for college, both times by Ruth herself. The hallway from the front door to the kitchen had photographs on both walls. Derek, at 4 years old, standing in the front yard with a plastic baseball bat. Derek at 9 in a suit 2 sizes too big at his grandmother's funeral. Derek at 14 on the basketball court at his high school mid-jump, the ball leaving his fingers. Derek at 18 graduation cap, the smile of someone who believed everything was about to begin. Derek at 24 shoosing hands with his first investor. The last photograph was Derek at 30 receiving his MBA. That was 12 years ago. There were no photographs after that. Not because nothing happened, because everything happened so fast that no one stopped to take a picture that Ruth was in. His old bedroom was at the end of the hall. She kept it exactly the way it was the day he left. Single bed, Michael Jordan poster above the headboard, a stack of textbooks on the desk, a pair of sneakers in the closet that no longer fit anyone. She changed the sheets once a month. She did not know why he was not coming to sleep in them, but the act of pulling the fitted sheet tight over the corners and smoothing the pillowcase flat was something her hands knew how to do for him, and she was not ready to let her hands forget. Ruth was not poor. She owned her home outright. She had $84,000 in a savings account. Derek had set up an automatic transfer 3 years and 6 months ago. $2,000 a month, deposited on the first of every month, into an account he had opened in her name. He had not called once in those 3 years and 6 months to ask whether the money had arrived. It always did, the way automated things always do, reliably, impersonally, without a voice attached. She did not need a job, but in March of that year, Ruth Arlene Gaines walked into the offices of Buildright Services, a commercial cleaning company contracted to service 6 office towers in Midtown and downtown Atlanta, and she applied for a position on the night custodial crew. She used her first and middle name only, Ruth Arlene, and when the interviewer, a man named Horace Whitfield, asked her for it, she said, "Arlene is my full legal name," and Horace wrote it down without pressing further, because he had 14 open positions, and 6 of them needed to be filled by Friday. She was placed on the crew assigned to Pierce and Gaines Tower. She did not request it, but when the assignment sheet was posted and she saw the name of the building, she stood in front of it for a long time. Horace asked if there was a problem. She said, "No, no problem at all." On her first night, she put on the navy blue uniform in her bedroom at home. She stood in front of the mirror on the back of the closet door and looked at herself. She did not recognize the woman looking back, not because of the uniform, because the last time she had worn a uniform for work was 18 years ago, when she was a nursing assistant at Grady Memorial Hospital. She had worn scrubs, then, teal. She remembered the color. She remembered the feel of the fabric. She remembered the way her feet ached after a 12-hour shift, and the way she would sit on the edge of her bed. And Derek, who was 15, then would bring her a glass of water without being asked. She looked at herself now. Navy blue, name badge, Ruth, no last name. She picked up her car keys. She drove 20 minutes west. In the dark, she pulled into the parking garage of a building with her son's name on it, and she clocked in for the first time at 9:58 on a Tuesday night in March. The elevator opened on the 41st floor and Ruth stepped out pushing a cleaning cart. The hallway was dark. Then the motion sensor lights flickered on one panel at a time, triggered by her movement. She was the only reason those lights turned on at this hour, the only body in the building that made this floor come alive after midnight. She started with the large conference room, 12 leather chairs around a long table. A whiteboard on the far wall still covered in notes from the afternoon. Someone had written Q3 strategy across the top in red marker and drawn arrows connecting boxes she did not understand. She wiped the table. She emptied the trash can. She straightened the chairs. She did not erase the whiteboard. That was not her job. The pantry next. 3 coffee mugs sitting unwashed in the sink. A half-eaten salad in a plastic container, with a fork still in it. A protein bar wrapper on the counter. She cleaned all of it. She wiped the counter until it was dry. She replaced the trash bag, the executive restroom. She scrubbed the sink in the mirror and the floor tiles on her knees. The tiles were Italian marble. She did not know that. She only knew they were cold under her palms. Then she reached the end of the hallway, the glass door, the corner office. The name on the door was not written anywhere. It did not need to be. Everyone who worked on this floor knew whose office it was. She looked through the glass walnut desk. Bookshelves behind it. A row of photographs on the shelf. Derek shaking hands with the governor of Georgia. Derek on the cover of a business magazine. Derek at a podium giving a speech. And in the far corner of the shelf, smaller than the others in a simple black frame, a photograph of a woman holding a boy. The boy was 3 years old. The woman was smiling. That photograph was the smallest one on the shelf, but it was there. She opened the door. She emptied the trash can. A protein bar wrapper. A crumpled sticky note. A business card from someone whose name she did not recognize. She wiped the desk. She vacuumed a rug. She cleaned away. She had cleaned everything in her life thoroughly, without rushing, without complaints. She reached into the trash can one more time. A piece of paper she had missed. A yellow sticky note crumpled into a ball. She smoothed it open. Handwriting? She recognized it immediately. She had known this handwriting since it was the alphabet written in pencil, in a first-grade workbook. The letters were different now. Sharper, more confident. But the way the T was crossed slightly too high, and the way the Y dropped below the line, with a small curl at the bottom, that had not changed. She folded the note. She put it in the pocket of her uniform. She did not read what it said. That was not why she took it. She finished cleaning the office. She turned off the light. She closed the glass door behind her. She had not come here to be sad. She had come here to be close. 3 years. That is how long Ruth cleaned the 41st floor of her son's building. 1,095 nights. And each one held something. In February of the first year, she found a bottle of painkillers in the top drawer of Deroich's desk. Prescription for his back. She held the bottle and read the label and remembered a basketball game his junior year of high school when he came down wrong on a layup and lay on the court holding his lower back. And she had run from the bleachers so fast she lost a shoe. She put the bottle back exactly where she found it. She did not tell anyone. In June of the first year, Derek stayed late. Pastor Ruth heard his voice from the hallway while she was cleaning the conference room 2 doors down. He was on the phone. His voice was tired and sharp at the edges. The voice of a man who had been holding something together all day and was running out of grip. She stood in the hallway with her cart. She did not go in. She stood there and listened to her son sound exhausted, and she could not hold him. In November of the first year, her colleague Yolanda Baptiste, 54, born in Kingston, Jamaica, 11 years cleaning office buildings in Atlanta, asked Ruth a question during their break in the basement lounge. She said, "Ruth, why are you doing this job at your age?" Ruth said, "I need the work." Yolanda looked at her for a long moment. She said, "No, you do not need work. You need a reason to leave your house every night." Ruth did not answer. Yolanda did not ask again. In the second year, Ruth began doing small things in Derek's office that no one would notice. She lined up the books on his shelf so their spines were even. She replaced his trash bag before it was full. She wiped the coffee ring on his desk more carefully than she wiped any other surface in the building. She adjusted the angle of the photograph on the shelf, the one with the woman and the boy, so it faced the desk more directly. Small things, the kind of care that leaves no fingerprint. Derek never noticed. He never wondered who did it. That was the point. In the second year, on a Thursday night in October, Ruth's back gave out on the 30th floor. She had been pulling a heavy trash bin across the hallway, and something seized in her lower spine. She sat down on the floor. She leaned against the wall. She breathed. She was 68 years old, and her body was not 68 the way she needed it to be. Commercial janitors in the United States have one of the highest rates of musculoskeletal injury among all service workers. The average age of a janitor in this country is 46. But the number of cleaning workers over 60 has been climbing for years because pensions are disappearing and Social Security does not stretch the way it used to, and the work does not care how old you are. It only cares whether you show up. Ruth did not belong to that group. She had savings. She had a home. She had a son who deposited $2,000 into her account every month without calling. But sitting on that floor at 2 o'clock in the morning with her back locked and the fluorescent lights buzzing above her, she was living their reality, every hour of it. She looked up at the ceiling. She wondered if her son knew how many conference rooms were on the 30th floor. She was certain he did not. In the third year, Derek began arriving earlier, 6:30 in the morning. Sometimes the gap between his arrival and Ruth's departure shrank to less than an hour. Some morning she had not finished the 41st floor when she heard the elevator chime down the hall. She would leave her cart in the supply closet and take the stairs. 41 flights down in shoes that were not made for stairs. She moved quickly, quietly. The way a person moves when being seen is not an option. One morning, she was still in the hallway when the elevator doors opened at the far end. She turned the corner just in time. She heard his footsteps on the marble. She pressed her back against the wall of the stairwell and held her breath. The closest they had been in 3 years. One wall between them. 1,095 nights. She had passed his office door 1,095 times. She never knocked. Not once. What most people did not see about Derek Gaines was this. He was losing. Not publicly, not yet. But the kind of losing that happens inside a building before it shows on the outside. Pearson Gaines Capital had just lost a $200 million development deal in Midtown. The land parcel they had been negotiating for 14 months went to a competing firm in Chicago. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. Derek sat in his office and listened to his lawyer explain the terms of withdrawal, and he did not say a word for 40 seconds after the call ended. He just sat there looking at the skyline through the window, like it had changed shape. His co-founder Marlon Pierce had started having private conversations with 2 board members about restructuring the partnership. Derek knew, because his assistant had seen the calendar invites meetings. Derek was not invited to lunches at restaurants. Marlon only went to when he wanted distance from the office, the kind of distance that comes before a decision. Derek was not sleeping well. 4 hours, most nights, sometimes 3. He drank 4 cups of coffee a day. Black, no sugar. The first one, at 6:45, before he left the penthouse. The last one at 4 in the afternoon, standing in the pantry on the 41st floor, staring at the espresso machine while it worked. He had started seeing a doctor for stomach pain. The doctor said it was stress. The doctor said to rest. Derek nodded and went back to the office. He was carrying the company the way a person carries something too heavy for one set of hands. Not because no one else could help, because he had stopped believing anyone else would carry it, right? That is what happens when you build something from nothing. You never fully trust that it can stand without you holding it up. So you hold it, and you do not put it down, because putting it down feels like letting go. And letting go feels like the version of yourself that slept on a futon and ate ramen out of a pot in a rented office was right all along. That you were never supposed to make it this far. He was 42 years old, and he was tired in a way that sleep could not fix. Tired in the bones, tired in the part of a person that is supposed to remember why they started. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, buried under the meetings and the calls and the board pressure and the stomach pain and the coffee and the silence of a penthouse that was too large for one person, there was a reminder on his phone. Every Sunday at 11 in the morning, 2 words: call mom. He had dismissed it 31 times in a row. Not angrily, not deliberately. The way you dismiss a notification when your hands are full, and you tell yourself you will come back to it, except you do not come back, and the next Sunday it appears again, and you dismiss it again. And after enough Sundays, the act of dismissing it becomes automatic. The thumb moves before the thought forms. 31 Sundays, 7 months. He remembered the last time he spoke to her. He was at Hartsfield, Jackson Gate B-17, waiting for a flight to Dallas. She had called at 6:47. He picked up on the 4th ring. The call lasted 4 minutes. She asked if he was eating enough. He said, "Yes, ma'am." She asked about the weather in Atlanta. He said it was fine. He told her he had a flight in 20 minutes. She was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that is not empty. The kind that is full of all the things a person has decided not to say. Then Saeed, "I'm glad you are doing well," he said. "Thank you, Mama. I will call you next week." He did not call the next week or the week after or any of the 31 weeks that followed. He did not know what that sentence meant. "I am glad you are doing well." He heard it as a pleasantry. A closing line, the kind of thing mothers say at the end of a phone call. He did not hear what was underneath it. That she had not seen him in over a year. That she was sitting in a house full of his photographs and none of his presents. That she had spent the last 3 minutes listening to his voice, the way a person listens to music they have missed. Not for the words, for the sound. He was not a bad son. He was a missing one. And there is a difference between those 2 things that matters more than most people realize. A bad son knows he is causing harm, and chooses it anyway. A missing son does not know he is gone. He thinks he is still there because the automatic deposit goes through on the 1st of every month, and the reminder is still on his phone, and the love is still somewhere inside him, folded up and stored in a drawer he will open when things slow down. Except things do not slow down. They only move faster, and the drawer stays closed. Every evening Derek left the building at 9. Every evening Ruth arrived at 10 1 hour. That was the distance between them. 1 hour and 41 flights of stairs. Yolanda Baptiste had been cleaning office buildings in Atlanta for 11 years. She was 54 years old. Born in Kingston, Jamaica, came to the United States at 31 with a nursing certificate that no hospital in Georgia would accept without additional coursework she could not afford. So she cleaned first a hotel in College Park, then a medical office in Dakar, then commercial buildings in Midtown through Build-Right Services. 11 years of lobbies and restrooms and conference rooms and elevator banks. She had cleaned places where people made more money in an hour than she made in a month. She did not think about that anymore. She had stopped thinking about it around year 4, when the math became too exhausting to keep carrying. She noticed Ruth the first week. Not because Ruth said anything unusual, because of the way she held the mop too carefully. The way a person holds a tool. They are still learning. Not the grip of someone who has done this for years. The grip of someone whose hands were trained for something else. Yolanda watched her for months. She watched the way Ruth talked, measured, clear, the vocabulary of someone who had spent time in professional settings. She watched the way Ruth moved through the building. Most of the crew moved fast. Get in, get done, get home. Ruth moved differently on the 41st floor. She slowed down. She spent more time there than on any other floor. She cleaned the corner office, at the end of the hall, with a kind of attention that went beyond thoroughness. It was something closer to tenderness. 14 months in, Yolanda asked. They were in the basement break room. 2 plastic chairs. A microwave that smelled like last night's soup. Yolanda was eating a sandwich she had packed that morning. Ruth was sitting with a cup of tea. Not drinking it, just holding it. Yolanda said, "Ruth, can I ask you something?" Ruth looked at her. Yolanda said, "Why do you clean the 41st floor the way you do?" Ruth said, "I just want to do it right." Yolanda put down her sandwich. She said, "I have cleaned this building for 6 years. I have seen every janitor who has ever been assigned to the executive floor. Not one of them cleaned it the way you clean it. You clean that floor like it is your house." Ruth did not answer. She looked down at the tea in her hands. The surface of it trembled slightly, whether from her hands or from something else. Yolanda could not tell. Yolanda did not push. She picked up her sandwich and took another bite. She said, "You do not have to tell me anything. Ruth, I just want you to know that I see it." That was all she said. She did not ask again. Not that night, not the next night, not any night after. But starting from that evening, Yolanda began cleaning the 41st floor alongside Ruth. She did not announce it. She did not explain it. She simply showed up at the elevator when Ruth's cart rolled out, and she walked beside her with her own cart, and they cleaned the floor together in silence. It was the kind of friendship that does not require a conversation to begin. The kind built, not on shared words, but on shared presence. On the understanding that sometimes the most important thing you can do for another person is simply be in the room with them and not ask why they are there. Ruth had been doing that for Derek for over a year. Now Yolanda was doing it for Ruth. 2 years and 8 months into Ruth's time at Pearson Gaines Tower, she missed a shift for the first time. Not once in 32 months had she been absent. Not for weather, not for holidays, not for the night her kitchen faucet broke and she had to put a bucket under the sink and leave it dripping until morning. She showed up every single night because showing up was the entire point. But on a Tuesday in November, she woke up with a fever of 101. Her body ached in places she did not know could ache. She tried to stand. She made it to the bathroom. She looked at herself in the mirror and knew she could not drive 20 minutes on the interstate in the dark. Not tonight. She lay back down. She looked at the clock on the nightstand. 10:14. The crew was already inside the building. Yolanda would be on the 16th floor by now. The 41st floor would be assigned to whoever was available. Someone who did not know that the CEO's bookshelf had a specific order. Someone who would empty the trash and move on. Someone who would not check the top drawer for the pill bottle or wipe the coffee ring from the same spot on the desk where it always appeared. She lay there and thought about the trash can in Derek's office filling up through the night and still being full when he arrived in the morning. She thought about the coffee stain. She thought about the books shifting out of alignment. These were small things. They should not have mattered. But they mattered to her the way only invisible things can matter to the person who has made them invisible on purpose. She closed her eyes. The fever made the room soft at the edges. She slept. The next morning, Derek walked into his office at 7:22. He sat down, he opened his laptop, he looked up. Something was different. He could not name it. The trash can was fuller than usual. The desk had a faint ring near the left edge, where his coffee mug sat every afternoon. The books on the shelf behind him were slightly uneven, one spine tilted to the right. He did not think my office was not cleaned properly. He thought something feels off. The way a person notices a change in temperature before they notice the window is open. He picked up his phone and called building management. He said, "My office was not cleaned last night. Can you make sure that does not happen again?" The building manager apologized, said he would follow up with the cleaning contractor. Derek said thank you and hung up. He forgot about it within 5 minutes. He had a call at 7:45. He did not know that the reason his office was not cleaned was that his mother was lying in a bed in Dakar with a fever thinking about his trash can. He did not know that the woman who cleaned his office every night had not missed a single shift in nearly 3 years. He did not know that missing this one had bothered her more than the fever itself. Ruth came back the next night. Her temperature was 99.4, not fully recovered, but she was there. She cleaned the 41st floor the way she always cleaned it. Carefully, completely, without anyone knowing she had ever been gone. 3 weeks after Ruth's absence, Derek stayed in his office past midnight for the first time in 2 years. A deal had an investor group in Seoul wanted to discuss terms. The call was scheduled for 1 o'clock in the morning, Atlanta time. His assistant had offered to set up a conference line from the penthouse Derek side. No, he would stay at the office. He wanted the files in front of him. He wanted the whiteboard. He wanted to be in the room where he did his thinking. At 11:30, he was sitting at his desk reviewing projections when he heard something in the hallway. A sound he had never heard before in this building at this hour. The soft squeak of rubber wheels on marble. The faint clatter of spray bottles in a plastic caddy. The sound of someone working. He looked up from his screen. Through the glass wall of his office down the hallway, he saw a figure, a woman pushing a cleaning cart toward the elevator at the far end of the floor. Her back was to him. Navy blue uniform, short gray hair. She moved at a steady pace. Not fast, not slow. The pace of someone who knew exactly where they were going and had been going there for a long time. He watched her for maybe 4 seconds, 5 at most. Then the elevator doors opened, and she stepped inside. And the doors closed, and the hallway was empty again. Derek sat still. Something had moved through him. Not recognition, something before recognition. The way your body remembers a smell before your mind can name it. The way your chest tightens when a song plays that you have not heard in years and you cannot remember the title, but your hands remember the feeling of hearing it. It was in the walk. Something about the way she carried herself, the angle of her shoulders, the particular steadiness of her stride. It was familiar in a way that lived below language, below thought, in the place where the body stores the people it has loved the longest. He shook his head slightly. He looked back at his screen. The numbers were still there. The call was in 90 minutes. He had work to do. The next morning, he called his assistant into his office. He said, "Who cleans this floor at night?" His assistant said, "The cleaning company, sir. Build Right Services. They have had the contract for 5 years." Derek said, "Do you know who specifically cleans this floor?" His assistant said, "No, sir. I have never been here at night." Derek nodded. He said, "Never mind." He waved his hand. His assistant left. He did not think about it again that day or the day after, but the feeling did not leave. It sat in a place he could not reach. The way a melody sits in the back of your mind when you cannot remember the song, but your body hums it anyway. It remembers before you do it always those. Horace Whitfield called Ruth into the break room on a Thursday night in September. The break room was in the basement. 2 plastic chairs. A microwave from a decade ago with a cracked handle that no one had replaced. A row of metal lockers along the wall, most of them dented at the corners. A bulletin board above the microwave with the shift schedule pinned to it, and a laminated sheet of OSHA safety guidelines that had started to yellow at the edges. Horace was 61 years old. Former Army, 14 years. Managing night custodial crews for Build Right Services across 3 buildings in Midtown Atlanta. He had hired hundreds of people in that time. He had watched most of them leave. Some lasted a few weeks. Some lasted a few months. The ones who stayed longer than a year were either desperate for the paycheck or carrying something they needed the work to hold in place. Build Right Services was what is known in the industry as a third-party facilities contractor. The building did not hire its janitors. The building hired Build Right hired the janitors. This meant that every person on the night crew technically worked for a company that most tenants of the building had never heard of. They wore Build Right badges. They were paid by Light. They received no benefits from the building and no health care from Build. If they were injured, the claim went to Build Right's insurance, not the building's. If they were fired, the building did not notice. Someone new showed up the next night, and the floors were still clean in the morning. That was the system. The people inside it were replaceable by design. Their labor was visible, te were not. Horace sat down across from Ruth. He said, "Ruth, you are 67 years old." She said, "I am aware of that." He said, "I have been watching you on the upper floors. You are working 41 levels every night. That is a lot of ground for anyone, let alone someone your age. I can reassign you 2 floors, 1 through 20. Same hours, same pay, less strain." Ruth looked at him. She said, "I am fine, Horace. I can handle it." He looked back at her. He did not argue, but something in his eyes stayed a beat longer than the conversation required. Horace had been doing this for 14 years. He knew when a person was working this job because they needed the $11.50 an hour. And he knew when a person was working this job for a reason that had nothing to do with money. Ruth was the second kind. He had known that since her first month. The way she moved through the building. The way she treated the 41st floor differently from every other floor she cleaned. The way she never complained and never took a sick day and never once asked to switch assignments. He did not ask her why. He had learned a long time ago that every person on his crew carried a story. Some of them had come from other countries. Some of them had lost jobs, that paid 5 times what this one did. Some of them were hiding from situations that were none of his business. His job was not to open those stories. His job was to make sure people were safe while they were living inside them. He said, "Ruth, you are better than anyone I have ever had on the executive floors. You clean that place like you know every single person who sits in every single room." Ruth stood up. She picked up her gloves from the table. She said, "Thank you, Horace. I would like to keep my assignment en oded 11. She walked out. He sat in the plastic chair for another moment, looking at the door she had just closed behind her. He did not know what her story was, but he knew it was there. The way you know a room has a window. Even before you open the curtain, the light gets in through the edges. On a Sunday evening in October, Derry Gaines sat on the couch in his penthouse in Buck. It was 8:47. The television was on, but he was not watching it. His phone was in his hand. His mother's number was on the screen. His thumb was resting on the call button. He did not press it. He had picked up the phone 4 times that evening. Each time he opened her contact. Each time he looked at the number. Each time he put the phone down. Not because he was busy. Not because he forgot. Because he knew what would happen if he called. She would answer on the second ring the way she always did. She would say his name, the way she always said it, with the particular warmth that made it sound like the word itself was something she had been keeping safe for him. And then, at some point during the conversation, she would ask when he was coming to visit, and he would not have an answer. And the silence that followed that question would be worse than the silence of not calling at all. He was afraid of the guilt more than the distance, so he chose the distance. He put the phone down on the cushion beside him. He stared at the ceiling. The penthouse was quiet. The kind of quiet that fills a large space when there is only one person in it, and that person has stopped making noise. 12 miles east. At that exact moment, Ruth Gaines stepped into the service elevator of Pearson Gaines Tower. She was beginning her shift. She pressed a button for the 41st floor. The elevator hummed. She took her phone out of her pocket. The home screen lit up. The wallpaper was a photograph of Derry taken at a family dinner 6 years ago. He was laughing at something she had said. She could not remember what it was anymore, but she remembered the laugh. She looked at the photograph for a moment. Then she put the phone back in her pocket. The elevator doors opened. She pushed her cart out into the dark hallway. 2 people thinking about each other at the same time. 12 metros apart, neither one speaking. Some distances are measured in miles. Some are measured in the words that no one says. Night 191. 4 nights before the end. Ruth was cleaning the executive restroom on the 41st floor. The Italian marble, the same tiles, she had scrubbed on her knees every night for nearly 3 years. She was working near the far wall where the floor met the base of the sink when her left foot slipped on the wet surface. Her shoe, the same pair she had been wearing since the beginning, the treads worn smooth from 1,000 nights of walking on polished stone, gave way beneath her. She went down hard. Her right hip hit the tile first, then her shoulder, then the side of her head grazed the edge of the sink cabinet. She lay on the floor. The fluorescent light above her buzzed. The ceiling tiles had a crack in the second row from the left that she had never noticed before. She noticed it now because she was looking up at it from the ground. She tried to push herself up. Her hip screamed. She stopped. She tried again. She got one hand flat on the floor and pressed. The pain ran from her hip to her ribs like something tearing. She stopped again. 10 minutes later, Yolanda found her. She had been cleaning the pantry down the hall, and had come to check when Ruth did not appear at their usual meeting point by the elevator. She walked into the restroom and saw Ruth on the floor, one hand braced against the wall, trying to pull herself up by the paper towel dispenser. Yolanda sighed Ruth. Ruth said, "I am fine. I slipped. Help me up." Yolanda did not help her up. She pulled out her phone and called Horace. Horace came up in the service elevator in 4 minutes. He looked at Ruth on the floor. He said he was calling an ambulance. Ruth said, "I do not need an ambulance. I just need to stand up." She said it the way a person says it when they have been handling pain alone for so long that they no longer recognize it as pain. They recognize it as another thing to get through. Horace called the ambulance anyway. Ruth refused to get in when it arrived. The paramedics checked her hip. They said it was likely a deep bruise, possibly a hairline fracture. They recommended an X-ray. She said no. They left. Horace sat Ruth down in the break room. He pulled out the incident report form. Every workplace in the United States is required by OSHA to document injuries that occur on the job. But in the commercial cleaning industry, particularly among outsourced crews, injuries are routinely underreported. Workers fear losing shifts. Workers fear being replaced. Workers on temporary contracts fear that a single incident report is the beginning of the end of their employment. Ruth was not afraid of losing her job. She was afraid of something else entirely. Horace worked through the form. Name, date, time, location, nature of injury. He reached the line that read emergency contact. He looked at Ruth. She looked at the form. The line was blank. It had been blank when she filled out her original application 3 years ago. She had left it empty on purpose. Yolanda was standing near the lockers. She had not left the room, she said quietly. Ruth, you have to let someone know. Ruth shook her head. Yolanda said, Do you have children? A long silence. The microwave hummed in the background. The fluorescent tube above them flickered once. Ruth said, Yes. Yolanda said, Then why do you not call them? Ruth looked at Yolanda. She looked at her for a long time. Something in her face shifted. Not breaking, opening the way a door opens when the person behind it has been leaning against it for years, and finally steps back, she said, Because my son owns this building. The room went completely still. Horace's pen stopped moving. Yolanda's hand, which had been resting on the locker door, dropped to her side. Neither of them spoke. The sentence sat in the air, the way a heavy object sits on a surface that was not built to hold it. You could feel the weight of it pressing down on everything in the room. Ruth did not say anything else. She did not explain. She did not cry. She sat in the plastic chair in the basement break room of her son's building in her navy blue custodial uniform with a bruised hip and a blank emergency contact line, and 3 years of silence sitting on her shoulders. Yolanda walked over. She sat down in the chair beside Ruth. She did not ask another question. She did not say a word. She just sat there. 2 women in cleaning uniforms under fluorescent light at 2 o'clock in the morning. One of them had just spoken the secret she had carried for 1,000 nights. The other one was simply there, which was enough. 2 days passed. Yolanda worked her shifts. She did not say anything to Horace about what Ruth had told her. She did not say anything to anyone she had promised. And Yolanda Baptiste was a woman who kept her promises, the way she kept everything else in her life, carefully, with her whole self behind it. But she watched Ruth. She watched her walk. The limp was still there. Ruth tried to hide it. She adjusted her stride, so the favoring of her left side was less obvious. But Yolanda had been walking beside her for over a year, and she knew the rhythm of Ruth's steps, the way a musician knows the tempo of a song they have played 1,000 times. The rhythm was off. It had been off for 2 nights, and it was not getting better. She watched Ruth push the cart down the 41st floor hallway. She watched her wheeze when she bent to empty a trash can. She watched her stand very still for a moment in front of the glass door of the corner office, the way she always did, except now one hand was pressed against her hip. On the second night after the fall, Yolanda made her decision. She did not call Derek Gaines. She did not have his number. She did not have access to the building directory. She was a cleaning worker. The people whose names were on the office doors were not people she could reach. But she could reach the lobby at 5:45 in the morning. 15 minutes before the night crew clocked out, Yolanda went to the 41st floor supply closet where Ruth kept her things during her shift. She found Ruth's Build-Right badge hanging on the hook inside the closet door. The clip-on kind photo ID name printed below the picture. Ruth Arlene, Possession Night. Custodial staff. Yolanda held the badge in her hand. She looked at the photo. Ruth was smiling in it. A small warm smile, the kind you give when someone tells you to smile for a camera, and you are not thinking about the picture, but about something else entirely. Yolanda wondered what Ruth had been thinking about the day that photograph was taken. She already knew the answer. She took the badge down the elevator to the lobby. She placed it on the front reception desk. Face up, not hidden, not buried under papers, centered on the marble surface where the morning security guard would see it first and where the building manager or an executive assistant would see it when handling lost items. She did not leave a note. She did not explain. She simply placed the truth on a counter and let it wait for the person who needed to find it. Yolanda clocked out at 6 o'clock. She walked to her car in the parking garage. She sat behind the wheel for a moment. She had broken her promise. She had done it the gentlest way she knew how. Not a phone call, not an accusation, not a confrontation, just a badge on a desk, just a photograph looking up at whoever would look down. The badge sat on the reception counter at 6:15 in the morning. The lobby was empty. The marble floors were still wet from the night crew's last pass. The overhead lights were dimming to their daytime setting, and in the photograph on the badge, Ruth Arlene was smiling. The smile her son had not seen in 3 years. Wednesday morning, las 7:15. Derek walked through the lobby of Pearson Gaines Tower, carrying a briefcase in one hand and his phone in the other. His assistant met him at the elevator bank with a coffee, black, no sugar. The same coffee every morning, handed to him at the same spot at the same time. His assistant said, Good morning, sir. Security found a lost employee badge at the front desk this morning. Cleaning crew. Do you want me to send it back to Bill? Derek said. Sure. He did not look up from his phone. His assistant held the badge out. Derek glanced at it the way a person glances at something they have already decided is not important. Then he stopped. His eyes moved to the badge. The Billionaire logo at the top, blue and white, then down to the photograph. Small, the size of a postage stamp. A woman's face. She was smiling. A quiet smile, the kind that is not meant for the camera, but for whatever the person behind the camera reminds her of. He knew the eyes. He had looked into those eyes every morning for 18 years, over breakfast, in the car on the way to school, from the doorway of his bedroom when she came to say goodnight, from the bleachers at basketball games, from the kitchen table where she sat across from him and asked about his day, and listened to every word as though no other sound in the world existed. He read the name printed below the photograph. Ruth. Arlene. No last name, no Gaines, but the name did not matter. The eyes were enough. The eyes were everything. Below, the name position, night custodial staff. Below that start date, the 14th of March, 2022, 3 years ago. Derek did not move. The lobby continued around him. Employees walking through the turnstiles, elevator doors opening and closing. Someone behind him said, "Good morning, Mr. Gaines." He did not hear it. He was reading the words, night custodial staff, for the third time. He was trying to make the words fit together with the face in the photograph. His mother, a cleaning uniform, his building 3 years. He said something to his assistant. His voice had changed. Not louder, not softer, shifted. The way a voice shifts when the person speaking has just received information that has rearranged the order of everything they thought they knew. He said, "When does the night cleaning crew work?" His assistant said, "Diez, página M2, 6 a.m., sir." He said, "Every night." His assistant said, "Every night. 1,095 nights." His mother had been inside this building 1,095 nights. She had ridden the service elevator to the 41st floor. She had pushed a cleaning cart down the same hallway he walked every morning. She had opened the glass door to his office and emptied his trash and wiped his desk and straightened his books and vacuumed his floor. She had stood in front of his photographs and looked at his face the way she had always looked at his face, with the full and steady attention of a woman who had never stopped watching over him. Not even when he stopped looking back. He had walked past her. He may have walked past her and not known it. Not once in 3 years had anyone told him her name. Not once had he asked. He turned toward the elevator, then he stopped. His legs did not hold. He took one step sideways, and his back found the wall, and he slid down it slowly. The way a building settles when something in its foundation has shifted. His knees came up. His head dropped forward. The badge was still in his right hand, pressed against his chest, held there the way you hold something that has just broken you open. He was sitting on the marble floor. The floor his mother had cleaned. The floor she had been on her knees scrubbing while he slept in a penthouse 12 miles away. Everything he had built in the last 15 years, every deal and every number and every name on every building, all of it felt exactly the same as it had felt 5 minutes ago, and completely different at the same time. The way a room feels different after someone tells you that a person you love was standing in it all along and you never turned around. His assistant was beside him. He said, "Mr. Gaines, are you okay?" Derek looked up. His eyes were dry. Not because he was holding it together, because the thing that was happening inside him had not reached his eyes yet. It was still in his chest, still moving through him, still becoming what it was going to become. He said 2 words, "Find her." Derek was in his office 20 minutes later. The door was closed. He called Billright Services. He asked for the operations manager. A woman named Patricia answered. He told her he needed information about an employee, Ruth Arlene, night custodial staff, assigned to Pierce and Gaines Tower. Patricia confirmed. Ruth Arlene, 67 years old, hired March 2022. Night shift, responsible for floors 35 through 41. Attendance record perfect. Not one absence in 3 years. No complaints filed. No disciplinary issues. Performance rating exceptional. One of the best they had ever had on any executive floor in any building in their entire portfolio. Derek asked for her home address. Patricia said she could not release personal employee information. Company policy. Derek said, "That woman is my mother." Silence on the other end. A long silence. The kind that happens when a person is trying to process a sentence that does not fit any category they have been trained to respond to. Patricia said, "Sir?" She listed no emergency contact on her file. That sentence landed harder than anything else. Harder than the badge, harder than the start date. His mother had worked in his building for 3 years, and she had left the emergency contact line blank, because if she had written his name, someone would have called him. And if someone had called him, the secret would have ended, and she was not ready for it to end. She had chosen to work without a safety net, rather than risk being found. He hung up the phone. He stood. He picked up his car keys from the desk. He walked out of the office and past his assistant and into the elevator, and through the lobby, and into the parking garage. He got in his car. He drove east on I-20, out of Midtown, past the new developments and the cranes and the glass towers, into the neighborhoods that got older, as the highway stretched, smaller buildings, narrower streets, hand-painted signs on corner stores, porches with people sitting on them in the afternoon, the part of Atlanta that had not been redesigned, the part that looked the way it had looked when he was a boy. He turned onto the street indicator. The oak trees were still there, the same ones from when he was 10, taller now. The branches met over the center of the road and made a tunnel of green that filtered the late afternoon light into something softer. He had ridden his bicycle under these trees. He had walked to school under them. He had not driven under them in 14 months. He pulled up in front of the house, the wooden gate his father had built, and Derek had repainted at 15. The front steps that his mother had painted twice by herself since he left for college. The porch light on, even though it was 4:30 in the afternoon and there was still an hour of daylight left. She always left it on. She had always left it on. The light inside the house was warm. She was home. He sat in the car. He did not get out, not because he was unsure, because he was trying to find the right words. And after 7 months of silence, there are no right words. There is only showing up, and the showing up is the word, the only one that matters. He sat there for 11 minutes. Then he opened the door. He walked up the front steps. He stood in front of the door. The same door he had walked through 10,000 times. He knocked footsteps, inside slow, the careful pace of someone whose body has started asking for more time between movements. The lock turned. The door opened. Ruth stood in the doorway, 67 years old. House slippers, a cotton blouse, an apron tied at the waist, her eyes, the same eyes from the badge, the same eyes from every morning of his childhood, except now there were lines around them that had not been there the last time he looked closely enough to notice. She looked at her son. He looked at his mother. Neither of them spoke. Her right hand was on the edge of the door, her knuckles slightly swollen, the knuckles of a woman who had spent 3 years gripping a mop handle every night. Behind her, the hallway stretched toward the kitchen. The photographs on the wall, his photographs, every one of them, from the plastic baseball bat to the NBA, still there, still in order, still dusted. The smell of food came from the kitchen. She was cooking. She was always cooking. Even now, even at 67, with swollen knuckles and a bruised hip, she was trying to hide. She was standing in her kitchen making dinner. She spoke first. She said, "What do you want to eat?" "Not, where have you been?" "Not, why did you stop calling?" "Not, do you know what I have been doing for the last 3 years?" The first sentence she said to her son, after 7 months of silence, was to ask if he was hungry. That is who she was. That is how she loved. Not in words, about love. In food, in presence, in the question that had never changed since he was 6 years old, and came through that same door after school. He stepped inside. He walked down the hallway. He looked at the photographs.